Hello, welcome everyone. Today we are going to be talking about our champions, the LA Thieves, and their season. A lot of ups and downs, but today I'm Nameless, joined alongside Allie. How are you doing, Allie?
Doing great. I'm kind of lost now. It's the off season. I don't know what to do. I don't know what games to play, but we still have a lot to talk about, Ant.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I miss work as well. That's why we're here talking about it. And the number one thing that we have to talk about is how the LA Thieves won the championship this year. It was a crazy season, and we got to get into the details.
The LA Thieves have done it. They have run it up. They are your CDL champions.
All right, let's rewind time and talk about the LA Thieves heading into the season. I mean, coming off of Cold War, it was a very disappointing performance for the LA Thieves in their first year in the Call of Duty League. So they make some changes. They bring in a player like Envoy, who was dropped by Optics. So, Allie, talk to me about this roster sort of heading into the season and the expectations.
Well, that's like one of the funniest storylines, right? Is that Optic has been dropping all these players, and the following year, for the past like 3 championships, that player goes on to win champs. So in a weird way of telling a tale, Envoy was kind of destined to win champs at the end of it. But one of the players I think I really want to focus on is Octane. You know, those are one of those players that he's been so consistent at where he's at. But it was a matter of he's a good player, but can he be great? Is he a great player? And I think this year really proved that he is one of the greater ARs that we have.
I think it's interesting with Octane because Octane was solidified, you know, one of the best ARs that we have in Call of Duty, maybe ever. And then throughout the Call of Duty League era, since we franchised, he has not had the best performance. I mean, he was on one of the worst, if not the worst teams in Seattle the first 2 years of the Call of Duty League. And then now he got back to the top. He was frying once again. So it's sort of a feel-good story for him. But Allie, as we know, the start of the season, it wasn't like that for them.
No, not at all. It was a team that had a very high ceiling when it was put together, but I don't think many people looked at that roster and was like, they're going to win champs at the end of the year. So like the talent was there, but the expectation from like everybody around them was not.
I think in the beginning of the season, they got top 4 at the kickoff. And then their, online performances were just abysmal. They were terrible. And they ended up getting 6th and then 8th in the next 2 tournaments. So this was a team that still was underperforming, but they committed to their roster. They had players like Draza, who, a challengers player, and he had some big moments, but he was a bit inconsistent. And then they had Kenny, who was running the AR, and he wasn't popping off every single game. So for those 2 players, they definitely had something to prove as well.
I completely agree with you. Draws is an interesting player for me because he oozes so much confidence, right? Like whenever Draws is on the map or whenever we see him at events, like he's the one that's standing up and yelling, and he's the one that, wants to make the pop-off plays. So when they made that role switch and to see Draza go back-to-back on the LA Thieves, I feel like it was almost solidifying his confidence. We talk about dogs with a lot of bark but no bite, and I think Draza is one of those players that really needed those wins under his belt to be like, listen, I'm here, I'm a superstar player, and I can win these championships, and I can go back-to-back, and that's what he did.
All right, so, talking about the early season and their struggles, like I said, they had that top 4 kickoff. Things were looking okay. And I remember them being very, very good at hardpoint, right? And that kind of went throughout, the online portion of stage 1 and at the major 1. But it was really major 3, the online portion and the LAN, right? Where they sort of fell off. What was wrong in that, time frame between major 1 and major 3? What went wrong for them?
I mean, I feel like it was the same thing that was going wrong the entire season is they weren't really playing together as a team, which is so funny because by the end of the year, that's what ended up getting them their chips, but it was their search and destroy. Like they just could not get on the same page when it came to that game mode. And then they bring in Shane and it was like an instant turnaround. Like they came back their first series and won the search and destroy. I remember interviewing Octane. I remember him having that folder and we were all just like, what is in that folder? Like,
Sam, what's in the folder? What's in the folder, Sam?
Don't worry about the folder.
What is in the folder,
Shane has us on a regiment. It's the philosophy is if you write something down, you remember it a little bit easier. So that's what we're doing over here at the LA Thieves camp.
And even though they were still struggling throughout Major 3, I feel like all the hard work that they put into, all of that different type of approaches they were taking to the game, obviously showed proof at Major 4.
Well, you know, with LA Thieves, Allie, I feel like it was a bit different because when we see teams make changes or bring in new coaching staff and stuff, at times it feels like it's frantic, right? Like it's right before the championship or it's right before the last major, you know? But with LA Thieves, they did it at the right time, in my mind. They did it, you know, after Major 3. They still had a lot of time to where they could go through that lull where they weren't going to be that great. Right after that change, Allie, they still weren't a great team. Like they had to figure it out. So do you think the timing that LA Thieves had with all their changes was the right time?
Well, like you said, it obviously was the right time because of what they go on to accomplish. I think Major 3 was just kind of practice for them. They needed to get those repetitions and they needed to realize that it wasn't going to be an overnight change. LA Thieves was a team a lot of people looked at was like, oh, why are you guys laughing in between matches? Like, you need to put more work in, which realistically, we have no idea how much work they put in. And obviously the fruits of that labor showed at Major 4 and at the champs.
You know, talking about like LA Thieves has changed throughout the season. You know, when Kenny switched to the SMG, he was frying, and it just changed the dynamic on the team. Like when it came to respawn, like everybody talks about the search and destroy and how that got a bit better, and that was the difference. But really, they were also the most dominant respawn team. What do you think it was? Like, was it Kenny just frying, or was it something else?
It was their comms, 100%. I think their teamwork and their communication got hit to like another level. When we did those listen-ins and we were hearing Sam kind of take over in those comms, especially in Respawn, it was like a completely different team. It was a completely different game to them. They always knew what they were doing. They were always knowing what type of pressure they were putting on the map, and they were always communicating to each other.
I'll play it. Outside maps.
Even if they didn't do the role change, I think LA Thieves still would have ended up with a chip this year at some point, just because it wasn't so much about who was on the team. It was about the problem solving that they took to make their roster work.
Yeah, you know, I would echo that. I think the communication was massive. It just felt like there was a culture shift in the LA Thieves camp. And I think really it was Pro-Am where they got, you know, second place at that tournament and they played so well, where everybody got that confidence, right? And we saw Kenny like just playing ultra confident, challenging everything when it came to the respawn. And then in terms of respawn, I think he just has a higher ceiling than Draza with an SMG in his hands. And he just hit that ceiling. I mean, we've seen it before and it was just lights out since then.
Yo, Ant, how crazy is it that it only took literally one season for Kenny and Octane to be together again to win champs?
I think it's crazy. I mean, you look at Kenny and he's got second twice at champs prior to this, 2018, 2019. And then in 2019, Thieves, they were amazing. They were one of the dominant teams that we had throughout the year. And, you know, they end up getting second at champs, which is disappointing. But these guys together, they're just a duo, right? Like they just need to be with the LA Thieves jersey on. That red and black is their colors. These guys fry when they're together and they just understand how each other play. And I think the biggest reason why these guys find so much success together is that they believe in each other. Like Kenny had some down periods throughout this, right? And Octane believed in him. He said, just switch your role, man. Like, I believe that you can turn up. And then same for Kenny with Octane. Everybody was dragging Octane's name, like saying that maybe he isn't the AR that he used to be. Kenny believed in him. Octane main AR all year long. They didn't even hint at making a roster change. So it's definitely wild for sure, but they're going to be teaming together for years. But, you know, since we're talking about the roster, let's talk about the organization a little bit. This is the only organization, Allie, that kept all 4 players the entire year. They didn't have a different player to match.
Sub either. Yeah, like not even like a sub in, not even somebody getting sick. Like it was the same 4 players loading into the map every single time. Like, because you want to say like, oh, well, technically in the final, both teams were because Atlanta FaZe, but technically Atlanta FaZe had a substitute at some point because their sub had to come in for somebody being sick. So I think that's so funny to me, but I guess it's also a testament to like when you have faith in the players and you know the talent is there, it comes down to the organization and the coaches and their problem solving skills to make it work out in the end.
Do you think this is going to change the landscape of Call of Duty? Because at times you see a lot of these organizations and teams, when they start to struggle, the first thought is to make a roster change. Now, LA Thieves, they didn't do that. They believed in their team. They believed in them so much that they spent more money and brought in another coach to help these guys out. That's how much they bought into this team. Do you think that's going to inspire these other organizations to sort of follow suit?
I hope so. I mean, from the way Rostermania is already looking, it's not looking too hot. But I would hope so, because I feel like that's been the way Call of Duty has been for a while. Is, when a team is struggling, they just start pointing fingers at players. Players start getting dropped. Like, I was a victim of this. I was one of those people that was like, I don't know, Kenny at the beginning of the season, I'm not a big fan. But they obviously proved me wrong. They proved a lot of people wrong and went back to back. So I hope it taught organizations a lot about having faith in your players and realizing sometimes it's not a player issue. It just comes down to getting them all on the same page. But unfortunately, so far heading into Rostermania, it does not look like any team has taken notes from LA Thieves' book except themselves.
Yeah, Rostermania has been different. A lot of these teams are, having unrestricted players and things of that nature, which we will get into in episodes down the line. So in the history of Call of Duty, at COD Champs, typically one of the best teams, if not the best team throughout the year, wins champs, right? And the last 2 years we had Dallas Empire, and they were a contender throughout the entire year, picked up a couple chips, and then they won the world championship. And then the next year we had Atlanta FaZe win a couple championships throughout the year. They win the world championship. Now this year it was LA Thieves at the end of the season. They won back to back. We had a different champion at every single event up until the LA Thieves said, no, we're gonna rewrite the history of Vanguard. We are dominant. How does that feel? Like, were you expecting something crazy like that to happen at the end, a non-favorite team to win?
I just, like anybody else, love like an insane storyline, and I feel like in Vanguard that's like all that we've had this year, LA Thieves being like the biggest testament to that, with the back-to-back at the end of the year, with Vanguard having everybody, like every LAN we had a different winner, like even counting Pro-Am into that, even counting Kickoff Classic, like we had a different winner every single time. So for LA Thieves to go back-to-back at the tail end of the year from Major 4 into champs is kind of insane, because like if we talked about this at the beginning of the year when they were really good at hardpoint and their respawn was looking good and it was like, oh, they just need to fix their search and destroy, like it wouldn't have been that crazy. But then when we had that big drop off in the middle of the year, and then it was the role change and nobody knew what was really going on, for them to then go back to back after like turmoil like that in the middle of the season, I think it was insane. But I think it's exciting. It's exciting as an analyst, it's exciting as a viewer, because it always keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, and you know what? My biggest takeaway from this is that like it is so impressive out of the LA Thieves. Yeah. One, because of the turnaround, but two, because of sort of the thoughts around this year in the game. Like everybody was talking about all these championships and all these teams. Like, this is an inconsistent title that different teams are just turning up and winning each major. But LA Thieves said, no, that's not the case. You guys just don't know how to play it at the level that we do. We figured out this game. That is the most impressive part, is that they turned an inconsistent year into a consistent one by winning back-to-back LANs and like beating every team in their wake, right? Like beating FaZe twice, beating New York in the Cinderella story. So for you, what would be your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway is that they had faith in each other and that they stuck with it. Like I can't imagine the highs and the lows as like a competitive player throughout the season when things just like consistently aren't going your way until the end of the year. Yeah, and obviously you can speak to this. Like, I think it's just so impressive to me what they were able to do with the situation that they had throughout the entire year.
I know this is a tough question to answer, right? You're not in these guys' heads, but who do you think this ring means the most to?
I think I'm going to go with Octane. I think because of the caliber of player that he is and like knowing what he's capable of himself, I feel like some of his confidence in the past, like the franchise league, has dropped off a little bit, especially with those 2 little seasons on the Seattle Surge. I feel like being on LA Thieves and kind of the same woes at the beginning of the years, people were calling for Octane to be dropped, people were calling for Kenny to be dropped. Like, there was already so much struggle at the beginning of the season and in the middle. I think getting this ring for him, we even saw it at Major 4, like his post-game reaction to winning Major 4, like everybody else was up and cheering and screaming, and for him it just looked like a giant weight had just been taken off of his shoulders. So I think going back to back means the absolute world to Octane. Obviously all of them, but Octane specifically being like the seasoned vet in the squad, being the AR, being the in-game leader, and a lot of pressure falling onto him, I think it probably means the most.
Yeah, certainly it means a lot to all of them, right? Like, it cements your history in Call of Duty. You know, I'm going to take it from a different angle. I feel like it means the most to Draza. This is a young guy from Alaska, right? That gets picked up, you know, by a team. He's only been in the league for a couple years. And this is a big name team, the LA Thieves. You know, he's got Nade Shot behind him, all these veterans around his, you know, squad trying to teach him the ways. And he comes in, he gets this championship. Not only does he like prove everybody like, I am the guy, I can compete at the highest level, like, he sets up his future, which I think is massive, right? Like, you're coming from Alaska to play Call of Duty, dropping everything. That is just such an inspiring story to me. And, you know, Draza gets a lot of hate thrown his way, you know, maybe because he throws it out and he has to take it back for the community for whatever reason. It definitely means a lot to him to get this championship. I know it feels good being up there with that ring.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us as we broke down the LA Thieves championship run. Let us know what you think in the comments below as to why they had such a big turnaround. Allie, thanks for joining us today, and community, keep an eye out for future episodes.